I needed to go a little bit deeper into the history of our educational system. So I met with Professor Herb Titus, who graduated cum laude from Harvard Law School, was the dean of 2 law schools, and is a constitutional scholar. He wanted to show me some little-known facts about the university to help bring all of this into focus.
Coming up here to the main gate into the Harvard Yard,
Right.
and you might look at this plaque here.
After God had carried us safe to New England, and we had builded our houses, provided necessaries for our livelihood, reared convenient places for God's worship, and settled the civil government.
Now let's look at that for a minute. We oftentimes hear about separation of church and state, as if the church has to be isolated from the affairs of the civil government. This says just the opposite. It says that if you're going to have a civil government that has justice and law, it has to be based upon a moral foundation which comes from the church.
At Harvard University, it says this, on the wall.
That's right.
And it's behind a tree and a fire hydrant. You know, what does that say?
As a matter of fact, the motto of Harvard in the beginning was Christ and the church.
Christ and the church.
Christ and the church. And then later it was Christ and the church and truth. Do you know what the motto is today?
What is it?
Truth. Without Christ and the church. Look right up here. You can see it there on this seal. See that top there? Can you read that?
Yeah. Christo et ecclesiae.
Yeah, Christ and the church. Now notice where it's located.
At the top.
At the top. Because underneath that is veritas, which is the Latin word for truth. Now notice, without the headship of Christ and the church, how can you know truth?
This is on the gates of Harvard.
That's right. And the problem is that 200 years after the founding of Harvard, they had a president by the name of Charles William Eliot, and he changed Harvard's motto, taking Christ and the church off and leaving only veritas.
When we ignore the inscriptions over the gates of Harvard and over the entrance to the Langdale School of Law, what happens to a nation?
A nation that attempts to build a foundation on something other than God's law ultimately will self-destruct, because you can't live according to the law as man invents it to be. The remnant of God's law continues in America simply because you can't live by any other rules than by God's rules. And you can't discard those rules. For example, we hold people responsible for murder, for theft, even though the dominant view of who man is evolutionary. We're only determined by our genes and our environment, and the reason that some people do things that they do is because it's inevitable, it's determined. Yet we can't live that way because we live in God's world. Not the evolutionary world of Darwin's imagination, but God's reality.